everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am As. Today I'm going to talk about my spring decks. So I have to be honest with you, between February and March I've been feeling a little bit anxious, just trying to get through some things, but I have found that reconnecting with my tarot practice has been such a grounding and comforting part of my life lately. And with spring finally here, I thought it would be a great time to share some of the decks that have been helping me, or still are, or will be in the next weeks, helping me through it all. It's funny how the colder, darker months can sometimes get to you, and for me it really started affecting me personally in the last months. But one thing I've learned over time is how important it is to reconnect with what brings you peace and clarity and joy, and for me that's always been tarot, among other things. Another thing I love to do, for example, is also working out. It helps you a lot to relieve stress and anxiety. And so I've been feeling this renewed energy as the seasons finally shifted and spring finally starts to show its face. And with it, I found my way back to my decks, to my spring decks too. Some of them are new and some I wasn't grabbing, or I haven't been grabbing them for a while. Spring has always felt like a time of growth for me and new beginnings. And my tarot practice too this year has really been a part of that personal journey, but also my practice is now renewing itself. And I'm doing some new things, and I will show you and in the next videos. I'm also journaling a lot, so I would like to show you what I'm doing and the decks I'm using for that, but that will be for another video. There is something about the lighter, brighter energy that all these decks bring right now that just feels right for this time of the year. So it's like they are offering me a fresh perspective, helping me shake off the heaviness of winter and really step into something new. So today I want to share with you some of these decks. And they are helping me reconnect, get back into me, into my rhythm, into me too, and bring some joy into my practice too. So I'm excited to dive into this with you, and hopefully you will find some decks you're using too. So feel free to comment and share what you're using too and what you're doing, if you own some of these or what you think. Let's dive into it. The first deck I'm going to show is one of my most recent crushes. This is the Green Glyphs Tarot. I bought this one secondhand and I really didn't expect, this is in perfect conditions, I really didn't expect the beauty and the cuteness of this deck. I knew this was a really tiny deck. I will show you also the guidebook in a moment, but I didn't expect how tiny or teeny it is. And I have also realized that through camera, you cannot really realize it, realize the actual size of this. I love the box. It's so nice. So let me just grab a card I have here. This is standard size to show you the difference. You can see it's really tiny and so cute. So when I opened the box, I wasn't really expecting this. I wasn't also not expecting like the color palette, because this is called the Green Glyphs, so I knew it was green, but I also like in this deck these more like brownish, like sepia maybe borders. And I wasn't expecting also the beauty of these edges. They are like gold, but also slightly, as you can see, it's like an holographic gold. I had seen, walks through of this deck, but when I held it in my hands, I really got the feeling that me and this deck, or this deck and I, are already familiar in some way. So it's almost feels more like reconnecting with something I know rather than stepping into something new. Even though this is the first of my spring decks because of the green color, so this gives me a very spring vibe, even though the colors are a little bit muted. And also the cuteness of these animals is something that gives me a sense of lightness, and also these strange creatures. I also like the minimalistic style, even though it's pretty symbolic, and I think there is a lot to gather from these cards and its symbolism, as well as the use of colors, even though it seems like the palette is restrained. And I have already done some readings. I have interviewed this deck. I felt connected to it right away. It was like an immediate bond. If you watch my previous video on beautiful decks I cannot connect with, this is exactly the opposite experience. So this is a deck I felt connected to right away. I can't wait, you know, to do some more work through April with it. I intend to journal with it, and I will show you also how I intend to journal with this one and what I intend to do. I also love how every suit is explained. You can see there have been many changes, you know, in this deck when it comes to the suits, more in the minor arcana, and it gives you a lot of explanations. The text for the minors is, you know, it's not too long, but I intend to do something with these keywords. Even though it might seem like very basic, actually I think it's very interesting, the text, you know, and how it's written. And I will also tell you in another video, in the next one, maybe the work that I want to do with these entries also in my tarot journal. There is also a lot of introduction here. I have still to read all this. I just went through it very quickly. I intend to use this one for spring, I think. Also for some of the imagery, like there is some coral here. I think it may be also summer deck, because it has like a little bit of that theme. I'm not bothered at all by the negative space. Actually, it's something I don't mind in decks, and many of my decks have this minimalistic also and white space in the background, you know. I didn't expect the immediate bonding that occurred with this deck, and I'm so grateful you know, that the person who was selling it didn't want it anymore. The deck was actually pretty new. She hadn't even used it, you know, and I can feel like this deck and I understand each other. So this is the Green Glyphs Tarot. Next deck I have selected is not new in my collection, is the Tarot of the Droning World. This has been with me for years, you know. This may also look sometimes as an autumn deck, and I've used this one in autumn too, because I think it may be for the colors, it may be because there is a lot of black, it may be also because the idea of droning has a lot to do with metamorphosis and transformation, and this for me it's a very October spooky season, like Scorpio theme too, you know. And there are sometimes, you know, like these snakes and so on. So this deck for me, it's all about transformation and the exploration of the innermost, you know, feelings and emotions, because these are all figures photographed and objects, you know, photographed in water. But this deck has an undeniable spring feel. You can see there are many flowers, there are fruits. It's such a floral deck, and it has an undeniable spring feel. And I love also this kind of Arcimboldi inspired compositions. You know, Arcimboldi was an Italian painter. He used to paint these figures by using all natural elements like vegetables and flowers too. Sometimes this deck is a little bit clownish too. I love the guidebook for this one. I think I talked about it in my 12 houses, 12 decks video. The guidebook for this one is very philosophical, and it has a unique approach. This deck is also supposed to be based on Marseille, even though I don't care. I don't read Marseille, even though I may have some Marseille inspired decks, but I just read this tarot as I know, you know. And I use the guidebook also a lot. This is one of my favorite cards. It's so spring. The only problem at the moment is that the guidebook, since I moved last year, I think it may still be in some box, and I haven't spotted the guidebook anywhere, but I will have to look deeper for it. This is such a staple in my collection. This is a deck I would never let go in any case. So it has his seasons, it has its own, you know, moments, its own purpose. And so this is a perfect selection for spring too. Lovely. So this is the Tarot of the Droning World. Next one that certainly brings in the feel of spring is the Vanessa House 8th edition. I made a video on this one when I did the unboxing and then the flip through, and also some pairings. The colors in this edition are so funky. They are offering such an interesting perspective just by the use of color and the meanings we associate with this color specifically. I am excited to dive into this, even though there are some decks, like for example my recent crushes I want to talk about, and among these there is the green glyphs I shown before. There are also other decks, as I was saying, that are maybe stealing my attention at the moment, but this is one that sits on my table. It was in my top 11 favorites too, and I intend to work with it. I found that it reads so well when I pair it with the next deck I'm going to show, actually, the Tarot de Fleur. Is a French one. Actually, it's called tarot, but it works like an oracle. I feel at least, I certainly need to pair this deck with something else to, like, not to expand its meanings, but I feel like this deck is so new for me. I may just need for now to work with it by pairing it with something else. This certainly will be in my rotation for springs in April. I already have also a rotation of many other decks I'm still using, and I'm still completing a cycle with the decks I've been using in March too, and I will show you. I mean to talk about these decks and my practice in a specific video dedicated to also how I journal with tarot, but this is certainly a deck that will be next in my rotation between probably April and May, just because I'm finishing also doing some work with other decks. So this is the Honasa House 8th edition. And here it is, the next deck I want to talk about, the next pick for my spring basket. This is the Tarot de Fleur. This is vintage and is clearly out of print. I have wanted this deck for years. Actually, the guidebook is in French, but it's also in English and in German, but I read it in English. So I go to the English section, and here I can understand perfectly what it says. I have wanted this one for so long, and being vintage and out of print, it was not easy to find it, and also this one can be very expensive if you happen to find it anywhere. But since the box was damaged, I could get this one for a fairly reasonable price. And also the person who had it, I think, maybe had found this one, at home. Maybe it was like a legacy left by a grandmother or someone, just because she wasn't interested in tarot at all. And I think the person I bought this one from was pretty happy to, let this one go. This is such a spring deck for me because it clearly features flowers and plants, but apart from the name of the plant, it also has keywords, which makes it so easy to work with this deck, because I may not know all the meanings of the plant, or maybe the associations chosen by the creator may not be so apparent when you buy a plant-based deck. And so I really like normally to have keywords on this type of cards, whether it's animals and plants in particular, maybe also crystals, but anything that maybe we need to explore more, and we would need to be very expert and knowing every type of plant or animal or crystal on earth to know all the meanings intuitively without relying on a guidebook. So I feel like having keywords here really makes it possible to work with the cards without relying too heavily on the guidebook, on this little white book, even though it's quite good, so it's quite essential. But when I used it, I found that the text, quite resonated with me. And so this is my next deck for spring. This is the out of print vintage Tarot de Fleur. The next one on my list is the Goddess of Love Tarot. This is the box, but I actually keep the deck in a new bag I got. So my deck is here. I edged this deck. This is a deck I've not been using for a while, but I have now taken out for this season and these weeks in particular, because now I'm starting doing some juicy, reading also on my website for clients. I'm offering, I don't know if it will be a limited edition or I don't know, it will be forever 18 plus reading. And this is so fun. I'm using this deck. I'm also sending pictures to my client who request this type of reading. And so far, I mean, it's so fun. I think this deck is so amazing. It was created, to explore the erotic feminine and also the empowered feminine, but also the depths and the mysteries of, desire and sexuality too, and attraction and chemistry and love. This is also a deck that I intend to use in my Venus deep dive this season. In Taurus season, it's named the Goddess of Love, right? So there may not be a more appropriate deck for this type of work, but I will talk about it. And since I love cows, and also this deck has a card that features a cow, this is my favorite card in the deck. It's actually a cow. So yes, this is the Goddess of Love Tarot. So perfect for the season of spring, since not only it is red and green and features a lot of roses and flowers and animals, but it really gives the idea of that rebirth, of desire and the reigniting of a spark that maybe we all feel with the spring season, because this is the season of rebirth. And yes, this deck can be quite explicit sometimes. Next one is actually connected to the previous, because the person who, created this deck has also curated the collage of the, in the Goddess of Love Tarot. I'm talking about Julia Popescu, known as Snakes for Her. You can look for her account also on Instagram. This is her deck, the Hong Kong Garden Tarot, and the box is just luxurious. I mean, this is how it looks inside. It's so beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful boxes. Normally I'm not a fan of huge boxes, but when they are that beautiful, I just love them. Also, this guidebook has like the cover, has like a textured, almost linen feel, but maybe the type of linen that is also coated. And this is how it looks. This is clearly a limited edition. There is a limited run, of 500 decks. I've also shown this one in my top 11 favorites. I intend to journal with this one. I am now currently working on and starting decorating, the journals for all the decks I want to use. And I will be using this one too. I think it will be more towards the end of this month, but this is certainly a spring deck for me. In particular because it's called the Hong Kong Garden. And just for the name of the deck, like it has garden in the name, so it has to be a spring deck. But also the colors, like these light blues and the red, this gives me a spring vibe. I think this is one of those decks that you just use all year round. I also want to try and couple this one and pair this one with the other by her, so the Goddess of Love Tarot. I mean, the collage is by her, and see how they work together, and maybe also together with the Tantric Dakini. This deck also has, some colors I really love. I love the gold, I love the red accents. I just love the vintage feel of it. I love the ancient Chinese retro vibe. I think this is also a very feminine deck. And look at the daisies. So this is so spring for me. It features a lot of flowers, a lot of feminine energy. I love how I got the moon for a reading not a long time ago. I love how the guidebook says that these flowers are not supposed to be hanging here, because normally flowers are born from the ground. And so we see with the moon that things are a little bit upside down. down, like when your emotions, you know, are a little bit upside down, and things may not be exactly how they seem or not be exactly clear, especially within yourself, you know. We all experience a little bit of this, like also having illusions and not seeing things for how they are. Something is not quite right in the image, so something may not just be quite right within you as well. I will do some very intentional work with this deck. I intend to journal with it, and that's how I will do my deep dive into this deck. For now, it's just a huge favorite, and it has a spring vibe for me. So this is the Hong Kong Garden Tarot, another of my most recent deck crushes. This is the Bottom Tarot. I think this may be actually in my top 10 or top 15 tarot decks ever. And currently, maybe together with the Lioness Oracle Tarot, that is maybe the only and one deck for me if I had to keep just one deck for now in my life, which is, you know, surreal to think, but this is the first, my huge favorite, you know, my current top deck of all, of all time, like. But the Bottom Tarot is very quickly asserting its position in my collection as a huge favorite, so it may be just second after the Lioness Oracle Tarot at the moment. So this was also an immediate crush. This is new, you know, so this is the second in the edition. It's not second hand, so I bought it on Tarot NL. It shipped so fast. I didn't expect this deck to arrive so fast, but it's normally a good sign, because normally when I want a deck and it arrives fast, you know, I'm not exhausted, you know, by the waiting. And it may be also a reason why I've connected so quickly with this one, but actually I wasn't expecting really the bond that I developed with it right away. So it was like, again, an immediate bonding experience with this one. And you can see why this is a spring deck. This is so beautiful. I'm completely in love with this one. And the curious thing is that I wasn't so drawn to it when I saw the first edition being released. I wasn't even drawn to it when I saw it on many other channels and people who were already and are already, you know, using and loving this deck. I had to wait, you know, my own time to be drawn finally to this one. Sometimes, you know, something clicks within us, and I don't know exactly what it might be. You can see also here, like the deer with his antlers. This is so spring. This is a deck for spring, you know. And for the colors, for the flowers, I featured in my beautiful decks I don't reach for 2 watercolor decks that I feel like I cannot connect with. These may be finally the watercolor deck I feel drawn to and I love. The creator of this deck painted these cards, I think, in her granny's kitchen, which gives to this card such an intimate energy that can be almost felt and perceived. And even though this is a Japanese inspired art, so it's an art based on Japanese cultural traditions, folklore, you know, I feel a connection, even though these traditions or these stories may be a little bit far from me or something I simply don't know. But there is something in this deck that resonates so deeply, and the artwork just makes me fall in love. So I'm completely in love with this deck. No surprise, this is next in my rotation, so I will use this one immediately. I actually won't even wait. I won't even start using decks I got before to dive deep into this one immediately, you know. So I will start journaling with this one. And next will be the Hong Kong Garden 2 and the Sacred Glyphs as well, because I'm using actually different journals and I'm doing different things with all these decks. But all this I intend to use in the next weeks, and I have already done some readings, personal readings with this one. I don't see myself using this deck for other people, but we will see. We will see. So for now, it just feels so perfect, and the imagery is tied to this sense of renewal the season brings. So this is definitely such a spring deck for me. And also, I don't know if you've seen, but there are some rabbits also in this deck, and the rabbit is a symbol for spring, you know. Also, botan means peony, which is actually the flower depicted on the backs. So this is the Botan Tarot second edition. Next one is another that I think was in my top 11 current favorites, and this is the Runners of the Sun Oracle by Amelia Rose. I'm also waiting impatiently for a tarot deck. She's working now on a new tarot deck, and you can also pre-order or reserve your copy for just $1 if you want. I don't need to explain why this feels so spring. It features a lot of fruits, and here are some strawberries, and there are just a lot of flowers in this deck too. Oh, I haven't shown the edges. They are holographic, so pretty, and also the backs. This is a collage deck featuring a lot of fruits, I would say, in vegetables. Also, you know, some different images, so not all the cards have this spring vibe, but definitely some of the colors and the flowers and the rabbits, even though this is Alice in Wonderland, certainly have this kind of spring vibe to me. And look how pretty this card is. So this deck is so intuitive for me, despite the collage. I talked about it in my Tarot for the Senses. This was my deck choice for the site prompt. So a deck that may overwhelm you visually. Even though visually it may seem overwhelming, and it is, actually, it's pretty intuitive and straightforward for me. So it has a keyword. You can also use numbers if you read that way. You can read numerologically also, oracle, I think. And it's so easy to use. It's very intuitive. There is a lot to pick up on in the images. This is the most springy card in the deck, I think. And there is also another cow here, which is an animal I love. I love cows, and there is another cow here. I feel very connected to this oracle, and it sits on my desk, and it's ready to be used in spring. I pair also this one with the Hong Kong Garden, and they are such a beautiful pairing. So this is the Runners of the Sun Oracle. Another one I'm showing for the first time is this one by Ted Andrews, the Feathered Omens, Messenger Birds from the Spirit World. So I'm not sure, I don't know anything about birds actually, and birds symbolism. I got this deck because I was curious. I'm also a fan of some of Ted Andrews decks, and especially I would like to have, I was in love with this tarot, you know, it's an animal based tarot deck, but I really couldn't find it. And when I saw it being sold secondhand, actually someone else stepped in and bought it. This is, as you can see, a bird-based oracle. Fortunately, it has some sentences here. So it has the name of the bird, and then it is also very colorful. Just it depends on the bird, you know. As you can see, so the name, and then there is a sentence. So you don't actually need to know much about birds. You can just work with it based on the cards. So this is pretty clear. Also, sometimes you have like either the name of the bird, or like in this case maybe an action like migration, you know, and the card says time to make a move. So it's pretty clear. I don't know actually how it will go with this one, but besides giving me like a spring feel vibe, you know, this also gives me an Easter vibe because like we have many birds, but we also have some eggs. Let me find the egg card. Okay, it was actually the first one I pulled. So this one, nesting, promise and hope. This card is cute, and this is so Easter, right? So, and the guidebook also for this deck is quite chunky. Let me show you. I don't like the box because I don't like to keep the cards, you know. If you also put the guidebook here, like you have to keep the cards like this, you know. So and they move around also. So I'm not a fan of the box, by the way. The guidebook is quite chunky, as I was saying, and it gives you a lot for each bird. It gives you also positive meanings, but also the reverse, which is interesting because this is an oracle, right? It has the positive but also less positive I don't want to say less positive, but maybe it's not about just, the lighter side necessarily, even though it is an animal-based deck. So it also steps into some pretty, I don't want to say negative meaning, but it has, like, for example, here it says, even though your ideas are appearing to be ignored, this will pass in time. Do not try to push or force your creative ideas. It will have the opposite effect of pushing, it just, maybe, I don't know if I like to read this, but I expected it to be just like all positive, and maybe that's what I need also this spring. But this is still a very informative guidebook, so it will be interesting to dive into it. And so this is the Feathered Omens by Ted Andrews. Finally, talking about spring decks. This is a deck I talked about in my last five, because this is one of the first 5 decks I have ever owned. This is the Dreaming Way Tarot. This is my trimmed version. I have trimmed the borders because I didn't like the copyright on the side here. And I said in that video that this is in my retirement basket, because I also have a retirement basket for my decks. It doesn't mean that it will stay there forever, and this is the case with this one, because actually I felt the pull to grab this one again after quite some time, I have to say. But this is such a clear reader for me. It's one that, again, it may be like, it has been resting for a while, but it is not going anywhere. This is such a clear reader, is one I trust, and I needed this insight it can provide for some specific readings. So I wanted to, a deck that could put the final word to some interpretations. This is also a deck that, even when I don't use it, on its own for readings, I like to use it as a clarifier for other readings, especially when I'm using maybe decks that are new and I don't know if I can trust them completely. I don't know if it happens to you. This one, just in case there are contradictions, I can rely on this one to provide that final clarity. And this is definitely a spring deck, so it has these green backs. I've learned also to love these backs, over time, and it's definitely a spring deck. That's why I think I've also felt compelled to reach out for it during this season, and it's now sitting on my desk. Because, I don't know, it may be the season, it's just, the feeling I get with this one. It's something clear, refreshing, no nonsense, very reliable, and I enjoy this one so much. After, some time, I'm enjoying this one again, and so it will be, and it is still one of my favorites of all time. So this is the Dreaming Way Tarot. Talking about spring decks, there is clearly an honorable mention, and this would be the Herb Crafter Tarot. I think it is not a spring deck video, without this deck, I think. And here I have the hidden gems, but I won't show it now. So this is definitely so spring, and it doesn't sit on my desk, but it is in one of my drawers. This also is a deck with a very familiar vibe, and even though I might not be like an expert, about herbs and plants, I have learned a lot using and reading with this one. So it's been a bit of a study deck. I think sometimes I may need to maybe journal also with this one. It's something I haven't done. I've just studied the guidebook. I find it very interesting. I like the system. The entries, resonate with me. And this is also a healing deck for me. I talked about this one in my favorite jeans, like comforting and soothing decks. And look at this. I keep it close because I know that I reach for this one actually all year round. Some decks don't really have a season, so you can work with this one all year round, but just for the aesthetic and the artwork, you can see it gives off the spring vibe. This is the Herb Crafter Tarot, a deck that I use also to connect with my grandmother's heritage, since both my grandmothers were into herbs, and so when I use this deck every time, I feel like I'm connecting also a little bit with, their knowledge or something that comes like from an ancestral source. Here we are. So this is the list of decks I want to use and work with in spring. These are not the only ones, of course, but these are some I'm reaching for during this season. I have other decks on my desk now, including my top 11 favorites, and also the decks I want to work with a little bit more intentionally, because currently I have had, some issues bonding with them. So as I have explained in some of my previous videos, so I have a lot of decks I'm working with very intentionally. But yes, so there are some decks I tend to reach for more during this season, and I completely love the Bhutan Tower. So this is actually one that I cannot stop looking at. I want to reach for it, I want to touch it. So this is a huge crush at the moment. So thank you so much for staying with me. Thank you so much for watching this. For those interested, remember I also offer personal readings on my website, esttarot.com. I really hope to see you soon in another video. Thank you so much again, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much. Bye bye.